الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والحمد لله الذي جعلنا من المتمسكين بولاية أمير المؤمنين والأئمة المعصومين عليهم السلام والحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه بعد الهمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن الذي ليس لصفته حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت معدود ولا أجل ممدود فطر الخلائق بقدرته ونشر الرياح برحمته ووتد بالصخور ميدان أرضه ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من يوم عداوتهم إلى يوم الدين أما بعد فقد قال الله عز وجل في كتابه الحكيم وهو أصدق القائلين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لقد من الله على المؤمنين إذ بعث فيهم رسولا من أنفسهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد أما بعد السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. I begin in the name of Allah, the most kind, the most merciful. It's due to that kindness and mercy that we have these opportunities where we gather in remembrance and glorification of Him, Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Then we begin this sermon the way the commander of the faithful, Ali ibn Abi Talib, alayhima afdalu salatu wassalam. Salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Would begin many of his sermons by advising us, Usikum ibadallah bitaqwallah. We advise you, O the servants of God, to be God conscious, God fearing, and pious human beings. We continue for the next 2 weeks, inshallah, on the chapter of rights or the haqq or the huqooq that are mentioned by our fourth Imam, in particular haqqul walad, the right of the child. And as we've been discussing in the subject of the right of the child, it more falls upon the shoulders of the parents to make sure that they are fulfilling the rights that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to their children. And amongst the many rights that we have mentioned, the most important is that we need to raise our children to be good servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if they meet that criteria, then it doesn't matter about materialistic success and so forth. And one of the key ingredients that we touched upon last week that aids in the raising and nurturing of children is love. And we talked about that in some detail last week. Another key area that parents have to constantly work on is to create a positive self-esteem into their children. Sometimes we all agree and recognize that children are very vulnerable. Yes, children can easily be duped. Children can easily lose their esteem. They can easily lose their guidance. And so we always have to be very careful about how we are dealing with children, how we are talking to children, and we are constantly encouraging children to make them into the best people that they can be. There are enough influences from the outside world that destroy a child's self-esteem. Not even a child, all of us, to be quite honest, right? But when we look at, for example, the effect that media has on the self-esteem of a child, media will generally portray people to look a certain way. that if you look a certain way, you can be popular. If you dress a certain way, you can be cooler. And there's no doubt that children are influenced by that. This is why we find so many children who, when they look at these pictures and they find that they don't look similar to that, will begin to change their lifestyle, whether it's drastic dieting, for example, and other illnesses that can come from that, or it's how, for example, they make themselves up or they talk. And not only is that influence so strong from what our children are exposed to all the time, other kids will also destroy the self-esteem of our children, right? From the way that children will bully other kids simply for the way that they dress, for example, or the way that they talk, for example, or what their name is. We may not have that difficulty here today in Peel as much, but it still exists because the number of Muslims and the number of ethnicities that are here. But there's no doubt, right, that children will pick and make fun of people, and that will change their perception and their own self-esteem. I'm never shy to give personal stories, but I remember when I was very young, my parents had bought me these shoes, right? And I don't know why, but they were Bart Simpson shoes. Yeah, and it was cool because they didn't realize, right? They went shopping, they bought me some Bart Simpson shoes, but I was in 7th grade at that time, right? And I tell you how I was bullied because of those shoes, right? Y'all laughing right now. I wasn't laughing back then, you know. I was embarrassed to wear those shoes, but I couldn't tell my parents to go buy me different shoes because we couldn't afford different shoes at that time, right? And so because of that, I would stay in class rather than going outside during recess, for example, because I knew kids would make fun of me, right? I would try to tear off that label of Bart Simpson from my shoes, right, and draw a Nike sign myself. All of these different steps that I took, right? We can laugh about it today, but I'm telling you, it still bothers me a little bit today, right? But my point is that something as simple as that, as shoes, crushed my self-esteem growing up. I didn't have the courage to talk to people. I didn't have courage to go play. Our kids are being influenced by these type of things all the time. All the time. And what is important, my brothers and sisters, is that we as parents cannot add fuel to that fire. Yeah? Their self-esteem is being challenged every day from the outside world. We as parents cannot challenge their self-esteem. It's our job to make sure that we raise their self-esteem. So certain things that we cannot do. We should not be comparing our children to other children. Yeah? But this child gets A's, how come you can't get A's, for example? This child listens to their parents, how come you don't listen to their parents, right? This is something that can crush your self-esteem. The reality is we don't know what that child does in private. No child is perfect, right? And so to compare a child to another child is not something that Islam encourages. Furthermore, it's our responsibility never to humiliate a child in public. Never. Doesn't mean you can't reprimand the child. If the child is acting not proper, you can talk to that child sternly. But to humiliate them and make fun of them in such a way that it ruins their self-esteem is frowned upon in Islam. There's a very famous story that I'm sure we've all heard of, is that there was a child who was sitting with the Prophet, and in the excitement of being a child or whatever it is, the child urinated on the Prophet. And the father of that child became so embarrassed that he yelled at that child in front of the Prophet while the Prophet was holding him. And the child's face turned red in embarrassment. And he went to grab the child away from the Prophet. And the Prophet held the child. He says, "What are you doing?" Right? He said, "These clothes of mine can be washed very simply. But what you have done to this child is you have crushed this child's self-esteem now. Right? You have ruined this for the child, where the child is now embarrassed. He'll be embarrassed to come to me. He'll be embarrassed to be in public. And you have made it seem like he's done something horrible. He's a child. Yeah, children do these type of things, right? Today we have diapers, so we may not feel that. But back then there was no diapers, right? But what the Prophet was trying to say is that we need to make sure that we don't humiliate our children in public. Of course, this doesn't mean, right, that we let them act a fool in public. No, we have to learn a balance, and life is about balance, and we have to learn to make sure that we have that. So what are certain things that we can do to make sure that our children's self-esteem is strong? Number one, we show respect to the child by talking to them in a normal voice and normal tone. It's very easy when a child is acting foolishly that we talk to them the way they're talking to us. Very easy to do that, right? To make fun of them or talk to them in that childish voice. We need to learn to control that, right? Because the child is doing that as a natural response. When we do that, we are actually saying to them that you're not worthy for our normal conversation. Part of that as well is to include the child in what is happening at the home level, for example. So it's not that the child makes decisions, but the child is part of the decision process. So if you're going out for dinner, let the child have a vote, for example, right? If you're buying something new, don't just bring it home without the child being aware of it. Let the child know of what's happening in the home. The child feels like they are involved and that they are part of the family and that they are concerned that their voices are heard. Number two, give responsibility to your child at home based on their age. There are certain things that a child should be doing at home. A child should not be just sitting there and everything being done for that child. And so, for example, depending on the age of the child should have a task of emptying the dishwasher, for example, right? That's your job. And we need you. It's not that you are doing this as a form of punishment, but you are doing this because we need you to make sure that the family runs properly and effectively. If your child is old enough to take out the trash, for example, whatever it is, it's important that the child feels that they are part of the household and that they have a major responsibility within that household to make that household run efficiently. And this adds to the self-esteem of the child. A third thing which is also very important is that don't interfere in everything that the child does, right? Children need space for healthy independence. So for example, when we tell our child to clean up their toys, and if they arrange their toys in a certain way that I don't like, let the child do that, right? Because we can't try to force the child to constantly meet our expectations on things where our expectations are not mandatory. You understand what I'm saying? There are certain times when our expectations are mandatory, as far as akhlaq, for example. But as far as the child's independence goes on certain matters, we need to let that child have a little bit of independence to recognize that I'm allowed to utilize my own imagination and I'm allowed to utilize my own independence. A child doesn't tell me how to stack the dishes after it's washed. I shouldn't tell the child to stack it in this order and not in this color. Maybe they're using their imagination to do certain things. We should allow and encourage that. The benefits of self-esteem are many, right? The child will be comfortable in their own skin. If we raise this self-esteem, the child will be comfortable in who they are. They will not seek validation from external factors. When the child is not comfortable or they feel that they are not appreciated, they will go towards others to seek validation. And this is when we begin to lose our children. Let the child know that they are appreciated, that they are valuable at home, and it is something that the child will then appreciate. Furthermore, when we raise self-esteem in children, what begins to happen is that they will begin to get confident in themselves and will be able to take on new tasks and new responsibilities much easier. If a child is constantly being yelled at or constantly being told no or constantly being shut down, the child will not have the courage to take on new responsibilities and new tasks. Rather, they will like to stay in a bubble where they know that they will not be criticized. These are all important points. Right? And Islam encourages all of these points to grow and help our children grow. Keep in mind, right, two things very quickly. That when we talk about self-esteem, we're not talking about ego. We're not trying to make these children arrogant. We're trying to make sure that these children are confident in what they're doing. And number two, that the most important ingredient that we talked about last time is love. That all of this that we talk about has to be done in a loving manner. And the child needs to know that they are loved and that they are appreciated within the house. When we do these things, we will make sure that we will help and aid in raising our children according to how God wants. And then we leave it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to take them where Allah wants. Wa akhiru da'wan alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد صدق الله العلي العظيم صل على محمد وعلى محمد اللهم صل على محمد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والحمد لله قاسم الجبارين مبير الظالمين مدرك الهاربين نكال الظالمين صريخ المستصرخين موضع حاجات الطالبين معتمد المؤمنين اللهم صل على خاتم النبيين وسيد المرسلين محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وصل على سيد الوصيين أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب صل على وصل على الصديقة الطاهرة فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين صل على محمد وآل محمد وصل على سبتي الرحمة وإمامي الهدى الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة صل على محمد وآل محمد وصل على علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة القائم المهدي صل على محمد وآل محمد صلاة لا غاية لعددها ولا نهاية لمددها ولا نفاد لأمدها اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات وتابع بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات إنك مجيب الدعوات إنك على كل شيء قدير ما صل على محمد وآل محمد. We are in the midst of shopping season at this moment. You know, the shopping season started back on Black Friday in November and will continue now till the end of December. And this is the season where, because of how things are marketed, you find that many people end up buying things that they don't really need. But because it was a good sale, we went out and we bought these things, right? And of course, we as Muslims are not immune from this. We are part of the cycle of consumerism that is existing in our world today. And that's what I want to talk about today and next week, inshallah, is about this, in a way, illness of consumerism. Yeah? Consumerism, you know, is the definition of consumerism is a social and economic order that encourages an acquisition of goods and services in ever-increasing amounts. Canadians will spend an average of $1,600 per family during this month, right? That's a lot of money on goods, right, on things. But it's not just this period that we see an increase in spending. Overall, and when we look at statistics of consumerism, they're alarming. And I just wanted to give you some statistics regarding this. Now, some of these statistics are for Americans because the sample size is bigger, but I don't think that we are far too different from these trends. So in 1980, Americans bought 12 new clothes a year, 12 items of new clothing a year. Now the average person buys 68 items of new clothing a year. That's a lot. Think about that, right? 68. Now again, you got to analyze your own life, right, to see like, okay, how true is this for my own life? And out of these 68 items that are bought, the average use of that is no more than 3 times. That means they don't wear it more than 3 times. They went out, they looked at something, it looked nice, they bought it. The average family in America spends $1,700 on clothes every year, and the American average adult, one American, throws out 68 pounds of clothes every year. Yeah? That's an amazing amount of waste if you think about it. 68 pounds of clothing. You know, sometimes we feel that I don't throw out, I give it to Goodwill, right? What do you think Goodwill's doing with it, right? If you didn't want it, why would Goodwill want it, right? And a lot of these clothes are just thrown out. And then the ones that they can send, they're thrown out to the third world countries, where even there it ends up in the landfills and things of that nature. The average American household has 300,000 items. Subhanallah. right? 300,000 things. If you just think about it, right? That every day we go to the dollar store, we buy one thing for our child. And that child, after 2 days, loses that item altogether. And then they find it a year later under their bed somewhere. But these type of items, there are never ending in our houses. British research has found that the average 10-year-old owns 238 toys. SubhanAllah. But plays with just 12 of them. Yeah? 238 toys. And the statistics like this are alarming, right? For example, 3.1% of the world's children live in America, yet American children own 40% of the toys that exist in the world today. And Americans spend 1.2 trillion annually on non-essential goods. That means goods that they don't really need, but they just buy for the sake of buying. We can go through a list of this. There's some really interesting documentaries that have been made recently on these subjects. For example, I don't want to give out names, but you can Google these things, right? You can go out and find some very interesting documentaries that talk about consumerism. And the effects of consumerism are multi-leveled. Okay, so number one, there's a great effect on the environment that takes place from this. It's really obvious, right? Where the effect of consumerism takes two branches. One is the waste that is created when we just throw away things because there is nothing we can do about them. And the second one is the increased manufacturing harms that are there from the production of these items. If you look at just the use of plastics, the use of plastics are increasing to such a point where the world doesn't know what to do with these plastics anymore. First, China used to be the primary buyer of these plastics, but then China saw the harms that it was having on their environments. And now those plastics are going to, for example, Malaysia, but now Malaysia is beginning to shut down. Where will these plastics end up, right? And the interesting item is that the plastic manufacturers claim that they are helping the cause by together donating $1 billion to help recycling. But yet they are using multi-billion dollars to create more plastic, right? And so it's just a fake cycle for them to say, look, we're doing something, but at the same time, they are constantly creating more. So the number one harm of consumerism is on the environment, right? The environment is taking a huge hit from both sides where we end up buying things we don't need. And then we end up manufacturing more things because we know people are buying things. And it's this vicious cycle that takes place. It also has an effect on the poor, right? Because of this ever-increasing consumerism, we find again two things happening. Number one, the poor continue to stay poor because they put themselves into debt to try to meet the standards of what's happening in society. They want to buy things so that they're not left out, but in the process of doing that, they add more and further debt. And the other avenue that affects the poor when it comes to this is that because there is such a demand for goods, it is promoting again poor labor. Right? So these things will go to countries where poor laborers will be forced to work in factories to produce these items and then remain in this ever vicious cycle of poverty through that. And then of course it has an effect on the individual, right? Like us, where it creates within us a lack of satisfaction of our lives. We're not satisfied anymore. We buy something, eventually something else comes out and we're not satisfied. A new phone came about. I just got a phone last year. Well, a new one came about, right? A new model of a car came about. A new clothes came about. Whatever it is, we're not satisfied with what we have. And we see this particularly in our children, right? Our children, you will buy them something and the very next day they'll want something else. And that's not so different than us. We can maybe control it and say, fine, I'll buy it next week. But a child doesn't have that control. They want something right away. And oftentimes it's part of this cycle that the family is living because new things are constantly coming into the house. The child wants to be part of that cycle of new things constantly coming into the house. And furthermore, it adds certain things like jealousy, rancor in our hearts. The effect of consumerism is huge, my brothers and sisters, right? And so what can we do about it? And inshallah, next week, we're going to just give a very simple Islamic principle as far as what Islam says about consumerism and how we can control it. I'm going to leave a cliffhanger, I guess you can say, for you to follow up next week on this subject. But it starts from the time that we're children, right? We need to raise our children in a way where material things are not what satisfies them, right? The love within the household should satisfy them. The appreciation of the child should satisfy them. And if that training is not happening from the time that they're children, then this vicious cycle of consumerism will continue, right? And we've seen the harms and the effects of that. I leave you with this today in case you miss me next week or if I'm not alive next week, right? That we need to be, in this holiday season in particular, right? When shopping is essential, look to see if you really need these things, right? Honestly, like, do you really need them? Right? And if the answer is, you know what, I don't really need them, but I really, really want them, practice some self-control. Honestly, practice some self-control. If there's not a need, you can survive without it. And let's see if we have the strength to do so. That's the number one technique Islam teaches us. And I pray that inshallah we can do so during this holiday season that can then continue throughout the rest of the year. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر صدق الله العلي العظيم.